Efendim günaydınlar, güzel bir İstanbul sabahında uyandık. Türkiye Sermaye Piyasaları Kongresi'nin ikinci ve son günündeyiz, A salonundayız. Yine birbirinden değerli isimleri ağırlayacağız bu salonda. Şöyle bir düne gidelim isterseniz. Dün açılış konuşmalarıyla başladı, ardından James Robinson'ın bir konferansı vardı, sunumu vardı, ardından kitap imzalama etkinliğiyle devam ettik. Akşamda tabiri caizse o yorgunluğu güzel bir gala yemeğiyle ve müzikle attık. Bugün artık ikinci gündeyiz. İsterseniz şöyle bir saat sonrasına gideyim, ben size bir bilgi vereyim. Saatler 9.30'u gösteriyor. 10.30'da Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Başbakan Yardımcısı Mehmet Şimşek burada olacak. CNN Türk özel yayınında Erdoğan Aktaş'ın sorularını cevaplayacak. Bir kez daha teyit edelim. İzleyicilerimize de açık olacak değil mi? Katılımcıları da. Tamam. Evet, her salonda izleyebilirsiniz. Burada da siz değerli katılımcılarımıza açık olacak. Ve şimdi yine birbirinden değerli isimleri ağırlayacağız burada panelimizde. Bir videomuz olacak mı? Videoyu izleyelim, ondan sonra kaldığımız yerden devam edelim.
Dikkat dikkat! Geleceğin nabzının tutulduğu buluşma başlıyor.
Sanayide, küçük, büyük, üretimin her köşesinde varız. Tarlalarda, bahçelerde, tek karış toprağın bile veriminde varız. Sofraların bereketinde, evin ekonomisinde varız. Yeni hayallerin büyümesinde, o hayallerin gerçeğe dönüşmesinde varız. Bizi asıl güçlendiren eğitimse, o eğitimi her yere, herkese götürmeye varız. Siz neredeyseniz hep orada, elinizin altında olmaya varız. Ortak geleceğimiz için çözümler aramaya, sayılara bakıp kimsenin göremediğini görmeye varız. Kadınları daha önce hiç kimsenin desteklemediği gibi destekliyoruz. Daha fazlasına da varız. Yarın değiştirecek startuplar için, yeni girişimciler için, iş yapmak, iyi yaşamak isteyen herkes için 1927'den beri biz varız. Biz bankayız. Biz Türk Ekonomi Bankası'yız. 90 yıldır.
Kısa ve etkili bir sunumdu. TEB'in hem böyle geleceği kucaklama, kadın, erkek ve eğitimle ilgili videosunu izledik. Şimdi işte TEB'den değerli isimleri de ağırlayacağız. Efendim bu panelimizin konusu Türkiye sermaye piyasalarına yatırım yapmaya devam etmek için 5 neden. Ve konu başlıklarına bakacak olursak, Türkiye sermaye piyasası portföy yatırımcıları için cazibesini korumaya nasıl devam edebilir? Yabancı araştırmacılar Türkiye'nin potansiyelini nasıl görüyor ve yatırımcıların Türkiye'den beklentileriyle portföy yatırımlarının getirisi örtüşüyor. Bu panelimizin moderatörü Türk Ekonomi Bankası'ndan Sermaye Piyasası Araçları Hizmetleri Direktörü Sayın ERTUNÇ GÜRSON olacak. Buyurun efendim. Hoş geldiniz. Ve değerli konuşmacılar, eğer sürçülisan edersem affola, yabancı telaffuzlarda Herş Tegala, Clearstream Head of Regulator Product Solutions. Welcome. BNP Paribas Securities Services Büyüyen Pazarlar Başkanı, Kıta Avrupa'sından James Woods. Welcome. Ve son olarak Blue by Asset Management ekonomist Timothy Ash. Ve efendim ben sözü ERTUNÇ GÜRSON Bey'e bırakıyorum. Buyurun.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Turkish Capital Markets Congress. My name is ERTUNÇ GÜRSON. I'm heading TEP Security Services, which is part of TEP and BNP Paribas Group. We have been providing custody and post-trade services to foreign institutional clients since 1990s, and for the last 10 years under TEP brand. As you know, the foreign institutional clients are quite important for capital markets, and as a previous speaker stated, we would like to discuss what are the key strengths of the Turkish capital markets and understand why the foreign institutional clients are investing in Turkey. We have invited three distinguished guests. These are different part of the financial sector. So we have a representative from asset management company, we have a representative from international infrastructure, and we have a representative from global and local custody. We have Tim Ash. He is a senior sovereign strategist at Blue Bay Asset Management in the UK. Blue Bay Asset Management is part of RBC Group and manages over 50 billion asset under management. Tim has been covering Turkey as economist for 18 years, writes articles about Turkey for publications such as Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and BBC. Welcome, Tim. Good morning. I know that you had a long journey, but we are looking forward to hear from you. Our second panelist, Hirsch Tegala, who is Vice President on Core Product Management at Clearstream, and he's responsible from Regulatory Product Solutions. In addition to his product role, Hirsch also has a regional role covering EMEA and India. Good morning, Hirsch. Welcome to Istanbul. Good to see you. And lastly, our panelist is James Woods from BNP Paribas Security Services, who is in charge of growth markets within continental Europe. He has been in the custody and post-trade business for more than 20 years, covering markets Latin America, continental Europe, and Central Eastern Europe. Good morning, James. Good to see you in Istanbul. Now, I would like to start with our panel about Turkish capital markets and understand from our panelists their view how the capital markets Turkey can attract foreign institutional clients, not just attract, but keep them coming into the Turkish market. Let me start with Tim. Tim, if you look at Turkish capital markets, we have seen lots of ups and downs for the last 20 years, but we also seen foreign institutional clients coming in and staying in Turkey. Can you please give us your view how the foreign institutional clients see the strength of the Turkish capital markets for last 10, 20 years?
Sure. Well, I think most institutional investors, I was on a sell-side analyst. Most of my clients were guys like me now, buy-side people. And I think over 20 years kind of coming here, what's pretty clear is the institutional investor base know Turkey very well. They visit very often, very frequently. They're in Istanbul, they're in Ankara, they travel around the country. They have lots of interaction with Turkish bankers, Turkish corporates, the Turkish government. And I think the general view of Turkey is, this is a big, important country with very strong institutions, very strong banking institutions, some very good corporates and companies. And the strengths, obviously, that we know, it's a good demographics, good location, great banking sector, in sovereign space, very strong public finances. And, it's a country that is challenging. I mean, also domestic politics, geopolitics. But that comes with the turf. I mean, that is Turkey. That is its location. And I think the institutional investor base are quite grown up about that. They look through that. And I think, if I think of Turkish credit, credit space, there is a willingness, an appetite to to buy Turkish credit, to hold Turkish credit, but in the end it's all about price. So there are definitely key strengths. I think the challenges are obviously those things I mentioned, you know, the geopolitics, domestic politics. At the moment, I think monetary policy, concerns about, you know, the economy overheating and about the policy response. That is probably keeping a lot of investors on the sidelines. For example, us. I mean, we are quite nervous, quite defensive in terms of Turkey at the moment. It's simply about macro management. There is our big, well, macro management is one of the biggest concerns, and we're not particularly convinced about the central bank and how it's responding to the challenges that Turkey faces. But I mean, just in answer to your specific answer to your question, I mean, look, I mean, this is a big market that the institutional investor base cannot ignore. We understand it well, we visit it well, but you know, Turkey's in competition with lots of other big liquid markets. You know, when I think about Turkey, I compare it with, say, Brazil, Argentina, Russia, and it's all relative value. I mean, you know, risk reward, what are the risks in Turkey, and are you being paid for the risk, basically? That's the key question that we're asking ourselves at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. When we look at the capital markets, we always think about the front office, and as Tim stated, is the local analysis of the economy. But we forget about there's other elements within that decision, and then we need to talk about the post-trade world. And Hirsch, you are representing Clearstream, which is a large international infrastructure that has a link to Turkish market. When you look at from your angle, how do you see that Turkish capital markets has performed over the last 20 years, and you're able to keep the interest alive vis-a-vis the international clients?
Sure, thanks, ERTUNÇ. First of all, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak, and well done to Teb for putting, you know, a post-trade slot together. I think, you know, differently to what a lot of audience members will hear over these 2 days, the post-trade piece often gets put to the side, but I think it has a relevant role to play in any discussion about the capital markets. Maybe just before I launch into answering your question directly, just a word on Clearstream. So again, differently to a lot of panelists that will speak over these 2 days, Clearstream is not an investment house. We're not a broker. We don't give out investment advice. We are a CSD that's licensed under the Settlement Finality Directive as a security settlement system in the European Union. And going forward, we will be licensed under CSDR. So we very much, and our customer base reflects what we do, which is principally 2 core elements. We provide ICSD services for the international Eurobond market, and we are the domestic CSD for the German market. And in fulfilling those services, we maintain external links to 57 domestic markets around the world, and Turkey is one of those. So our link into Turkey, and allied with the fact that we provide services on the Eurobond market, put us in quite a unique or pivotal position, certainly in terms of how a domestic market develops. Turkey is no different. So we channel investment flows from the buy side, from the sell side into Turkey, and we allow Turkish issuers, Turkish lead managers to tap the Eurobond market. So we take a very much an infrastructure-based approach. Now our footprint covers a number of markets in this region, and we'll continue to build those markets out. Recently announced Armenia, Georgia. So Turkey is a market we've been present in for over 15 years, and as Tim mentioned, we see it as a market that has potential. The thing is, we've been saying it's had potential, certainly on a macro perspective, for most of the time I've been covering it. The good news is on the infrastructure side in Turkey, there's been a lot of work. There's been a lot of excellent work done. Both from a structural perspective and from a regulatory perspective. And yesterday, during one of the keynotes from Mr. James Robinson, we we learned and we heard about the importance of inclusive structures, and I think that's definitely the direction Turkey's taken since 2001. I don't think we need to dwell on the issues that the market was facing too much. I think there have been plenty of conferences since then to go over that. But I think that sort of the key lessons there, and something from an infrastructure perspective that we look at when we assess a domestic market is commercial bank risk, risk of brokers, and the general inherent custody risks that exist within a domestic market. And a lot of that's been alleviated since 2001, and credit should go to the authorities for doing that. In terms of what sort of keeps Turkey, or the relative strengths of the Turkish market, I think stability on the tax regime post-2005 is crucial, so the withholding tax on capital gains, handling issues such as tax, which are very much high variables, is extremely time-consuming for the international community. We would rather be focusing on other key parts of post-trade services rather than something that's so highly consuming in terms of resource. So I think that's crucial. I think one area where Turkey's also done very well is in terms of the reliability on the issuer side in terms of payments, income payments being on time, few defaults. I think that's crucial. All the more remarkable because for many years, or until very recently, there was no pay date rule in Turkey. So, that was all happening because the issuers were strong. The low credit rating environment, and we heard yesterday from the CEO of Borsa Istanbul, who was in quite ebullient and bullish mood, and quite rightly so. He has a lot to be proud of. Say that we don't necessarily need to aspire to investment grade, and I think that's true. It's good to be confident in your own market, but lack of performance on the credit rating side has a knock-on impact in the post-trade world, certainly for an institution like Clearstream, where we operate one of 4 premier collateral management systems in the world, where securities that are eligible in those collateral management baskets are very much in the shop window when it comes to institutional investors. So not being part of that, I think, is going to harm the appeal of Turkish securities in the long term. On the FX side, that's another important aspect for us. It's easy to get hard currency in. It's easy to convert hard currency, into Turkish lira, and it's easy to get the Turkish lira out. That's crucial. So as Tim mentioned, even though the central bank is looking to reduce lira depreciation, there are no major alarm bells here. Clearly, exchange rates are moving as they are, but it's generally stable. Again, we've got the established institutions and practices which are very well ensconced. I think from a Clearstream perspective, as part of Deutsche Börse, we understand what the regulators have tried to do with Borsa Istanbul and the structuring it the way they have with the clearinghouse and with the registry in the same organization, so to speak. There are a great deal of synergies that can be obtained from that, and it gives confidence as well to have that. I think there are a number of other points. I think sort of developing instruments, corporate bond market certainly is one area that needs to be looked at and could be a stronger asset to the Turkish market. And I think 2 sort of more soft points just to finish off with. One is from the perspective of a large institution that tries to do new things in the Turkish market, having a regulator or a capital markets board, as you have here in Turkey, that's open, that's willing to learn, that has a kind of a very energetic view in terms of monitoring developments outside of Turkey is extremely important. Going and sitting with the regulator for us is a major advantage. We like markets where we can do that, and Turkey is certainly one of those markets. So that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. And finally, it's yourselves at TEB. There's an extremely strong custodian community here in Turkey, and that is a major, major advantage. It's very important from a post-trade perspective to know that you can reach out to your local agent, to your local custodian, and have a commercially interesting conversation, that the agent has gravitas and integrity in the market to be able to reach out either to the regulators, to the ministries, and solve problems. And that's extremely important. And for those of you who've known me for the years I've been covering Turkey, there are very few markets in this region and very few markets of similar size where you have such a strong set of local custodians with, resourced with very capable people, and that's extremely important.
Thank you, Hirsch. James, Hirsch mentioned stability and reliability. That was two interesting words for me, specifically this part of the world. Being the largest European custodian in Europe, how do you perceive the Turkish capital markets in terms of foreign institutional clients' point of view? What do you see as the strength of this market?
Well, first off, thank you for the invitation and participating in the Congress. If I think about the non-resident institutional investors over the last 10 years and then afterward think about how they look at the Turkey's progress, I have to say non-resident institutional investors over the last 10 years have been obsessed with two different types of returns. Obviously, in the difficult environment that we all know of the last 10 years, they've been worried about the return on the assets, how much they're going to get back. And so is Turkey the market to go into? What asset classes can they look at globally, etc. And also which cross-border infrastructures are available to them. But more importantly, I think in the last 10 years where we've seen a major shift in non-resident institutional investors is they're obsessed with the return of those assets. And why? I think two names come to mind, and they illustrate the importance of post-trade: Madoff and Lehman Brothers. So about 9 years ago, we had the Madoff and the Lehman Brothers situations, which raised the concern for investors about bankruptcy, about asset safety, and these two elements are constantly on the mind of non-resident investors. So if we look at the progress that made in the Turkish market's post-trade environment, I have seen a significant improvement, and we've gone a long way on the road to improving how the post-trade environment works. It's efficient. Takas Bank, the CSD, and as Hirsch mentioned, the participants in the market have worked very hard on their systems, their people, their training. It is a market with high STP. It's a very low fail rate. So when a non-resident investor trades the market, they know that they're going to immediately get the asset back in a safe manner. The second area I think that I can say about the market is that it has implemented some very important global standards in terms of risk mitigants. We have the derivatives market, as well as the introduction of the CCP, or the central counterparty. And those two tools are great ways of hedging or reducing counterparty risk. And lastly, we talk about the ups and downs often about the Turkish market in terms of volume and volatility. But ironically, from a post-trade non-resident perspective, they see this capacity to deal with that volatility quickly and efficiently as a positive. They want to know that if they're going to trade the market, that the market is going to be able to respond. We have seen other markets, even in Europe, in the last 10 years, that as volumes picked up, fail rates picked up, and the systems have slowed down. So I think we've seen that in the last 10 years, a confidence of non-resident investors, if they're going to trade and execute this market, they're working in a safe and an efficient place to do so.
James, you mentioned the Lehman case. I mean, what has changed post-Lehman environment in the world? For sure, there's a lot of changes took place in terms of regulation point of view. What does it mean to Turkey, these changes?
Well, I think Turkey has to be sensitive to the new world that these banks and non-resident banks are operating within. The regulatory environment post-Lehman is incredibly strong. I mean, not only on the fines perspective, there's been over 300 billion in fines levied against the major institutions, but just the sheer scope and impact of the regulations themselves are a huge drain on both resources of those banks as well as the liquidity or the capital that they have. I think all non-resident banks and institutions investing into markets globally have had to find a way to adapt. They've had to find ways to shrink to grow in this new world. And if I translate that as a recommendation or something that we need to be sensitive to in this market, the market cannot surprise the non-resident institutional investors. And what do I mean by that? Imagine a world in which you have less resources, less capital, and an inability to adapt to new changes quickly. If we've seen it recently, for example, in Europe we had Spain introduce market reform, and unfortunately it was done very quickly, and the investment community and the participants in the market didn't have time to do adequate testing. And because it went live with some doubts or some confusions about local specificities, which were very unique to the Spanish market, the investors chose not to trade the market for a period of time. They chose to step back until they had time to look at it. And the same happened within core of Europe. We had something called Target 2 Securities, which was an introduction of a new settlement platform shared across the major European markets. In the first wave, unfortunately, some domestic participants weren't ready for that change, along with the fact that it was such a fundamental change of how things were going to happen and new. At the same time, Greece, that was going live, was hit with capital reform, and I saw the same drawback from the market. So I know that the chairman of Borsa said yesterday about we don't need to rediscover America. I think we can have surprises, and at the same time, if you're going to introduce new products and services in the market, you must be sensitive to do them in alignment with standards that exist already in the global markets, because there are not the resources to review it and not the energy or capital to take risks.
Thank you very much, James. Hirsch, if we move to you, as James stated, no surprises, stability, you also mentioned. When you look at the recent market changes, what can you tell us that from Clearstream point of view, what are the key developments on the Turkish market?
Yeah, I think, you know, for reasons of time, I don't think we can go into all of the individual or sort of nitty-gritty market changes as such, but I think there are two that we can dwell on. First of all is the introduction of the CCP, and maybe James will have some further views on that from a custodian or global custodian perspective, but from a Clearstream perspective, and from a network management perspective, if you like, looking in on Turkey, I think the evolution of the CCP has been an extremely important addition to the infrastructure landscape of Turkey. I think looking at the market as a whole, it has the ability to reduce certain risks. I think Clearstream, obviously, as part of Deutsche Börse, we understand the vital role that CCPs play, and I think it's going to be something that defines the market. I think the only sort of hesitancy on that is that, you know, the challenge is to make sure or to ensure that there's enough that there are enough high quality liquid assets to make sure that the CCP functions as it should, and then from that perspective, the large collateral engines, of which Clearstream is one, would potentially have a role to play for both Turkish market participants and the CCP itself. I think the other interesting development, I'll leave James to come back on the CCP if he wants to later. I'll just quickly rush on to the next major development, which is something we've been talking to the capital markets board about for some considerable time, and that's the potential development of omnibus accounts. Now, there are clearly pros and cons. The Turkish market has taken a studious decision some time ago to arrange the market in the way that it has at the level of the CRA, based on tax IDs, based on individual segregated accounts. And from a Clearstream perspective, we fully support and understand why that's the case. And we've adapted and spent considerable investment resources in making sure that we function in full compliance and in accordance with the Turkish market. I think as a market develops, though, and there are sort of basically five stages to a market development, which we might touch upon later, but one of those key stages for a securities market is that at some stage the concept of collateralization enters, and what omnibus accounts have the power to do is to make sure that securities can remain in a fungible environment and have ownership transferred, particularly to support collateral management or securities lending in the international space in a more efficient way. So I think that there will be a point of inflection for the Turkish market as a whole, and some of those thought processes will be led by the regulators in conjunction with perhaps key international participants as to whether that's the right way to go. And I think at this moment we've had a constructive discussion with all major stakeholders, and that will continue.
Thank you. Tim, if you look at 2016, we had a quite interesting year, but I think if you look at 2017, how would you see the performance of Turkey comparing to the last year, and where do you think that we're going to be?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's been a remarkable 2017, I guess, for guys looking at Turkey like myself. I'd hold my hand up, and I think like most economists who covered Turkey, if you go back a year and we projected what we were thinking was going to happen this year, I mean, most people thought post-failed coup, growth would be challenged. So we assumed, I think, growth would be 2-3%. I mean, the big surprise has been the resilience of the Turkish economy. I mean, we've had 5% half-year growth, talk about double-digit third-year growth, full-year 6-7%, absolutely remarkable given what Turkey's been through. And I think that's a reflection of all the things I said earlier, which is, it's a very dynamic, pro-business, entrepreneurial culture, demographics, banking, fiscal. Government's been very proactive, certainly in terms of fiscal stimulus. That's been good. But I think going forward a bit and looking to the future, now the concern for me is actually macro stability. I think the economy has been overstimulated. Lots of red flags have been raised in my mind on the macro front. It's great having 6% growth, but you've got to pay for it. And unfortunately, what I see now is the current account deficit is widening. It is a structural problem in Turkey, no doubt about it. But now there is a cyclical driver from it. If you look to the September current account number, 4.5 billion, 3 times the year earlier level from an already high level. So a widening current account deficit. And actually, I've turned much more bearish Turkey. I was quite constructive first half of the year. I'm less constructive now because not only is the current account deficit widening, if you look at the structure of current account financing, it's really bad quality. I mean, historically, in recent years, Turkey's not done very well in non-debt creating inflows for foreign direct investments, about 15%. What really worries me, though, is the change. If you look at medium and long-term debt financing of the current account, which historically was about 50%, that's down to maybe 10-15% as well. And basically, 70% of the current account has been funded by hot money. Unfortunately, it's guys like myself, the interest rate lobby dudes, unfortunately, that is helping sustain the current account deficit. And that's not a healthy scenario at all. And unfortunately, and the other concern I have in a way is if you look at, obviously Turkey has very challenging relationships at the moment with Europe and with the US. But actually, if you look at trade, foreign direct investment, and you look at financing, in the end, Turkey is financed from the West. It is financed from Europe, it is financed from the US, it is financed from institutional investors, and I think it really worries me about the poor state of the relationship between Turkey and the West. And I know it's both sides. We could talk about why that is, and there's fault on both sides, but the reality is, it's sad you can't bite the hand that feeds you, and unfortunately, current account deficit is widening, quality of financing is very poor, and there's been a change to much shorter term financing on portfolio inflows, which really worries me. And again, going back to this idea, frankly, central bank is out to lunch. I just do not get that the central bank cannot see what everyone from outside sees in Turkey, which is, inflation more than double the central bank's target. 5% target is 12% and rising. Current account deficit also widening. They need to tighten much more aggressively than they're doing. And I think, unfortunately, there's a political dimension there that probably we all know about. And unfortunately, guys like me are really concerned at the moment. And I think, it's interesting, there was a discussion about, Lehman and Madoff and all that kind of thing. Actually, I'm not really worried about credit risk, to be honest, in Turkey. For me, willingness to pay is very high. I think what's interesting, if you look at the rise of external debt and external borrowing in Turkey, I mean, really, it didn't really go down the credit curve very much. Turkish entities that tapped international capital markets are still very much blue chip. The best Turkish companies, the best Turkish banks, they really value their international banking relationships. The willingness is much higher, I think, than Turkey's actual credit rating. So I'm not really worried about credit risk. I'm worried about macro stability. And I think, for me, the interest rate needs to adjust very aggressively higher, and the currency needs to weaken really significantly. And Turkish rates and FX need to reprice. And I think then you'll get people coming back into Turkish credit markets. But at the moment, the macro doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very stable and sustainable, frankly. And for me, it's a repeat of 2013, 2014, and also 2016, 2017. We've been there so many times before. Central bank gets behind the curve, doesn't want to raise rates for political reasons. The market tests it, currency gets smashed, and they have to raise rates much more aggressively. And we're there again. I mean, it's just remarkable that the central bank makes the same mistake time and time again. So this is the biggest risk that I see. Unless the central bank addresses the issue, there's going to be a sudden stop to this great macro story or the growth story that certainly the government's trying to push forward.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so just can I get your last sentences? What do you recommend for Turkey for the future in order to continue to attract foreign institutional growth? Just one sentence, it will be great. Tim?
I've spoken a lot already. I hope that your president surrounds himself by some great advisors who understand basic macro, give him very sage advice, and that the central bank is able to do what it should do, and which is 101 economics. It's not difficult things, and Turkey has some great banks, great corporates, some really good economists. So I struggle to understand why we are where we are at the moment.
Hirsch?
Yeah, in a sentence. I think on the post-trade side, I mean, listen, we're in a really good place in Turkey on the post-trade side. I think the geopolitical shocks that Tim's alluded to and James did earlier are crucial. I think as a market, those need to be avoided. Tax stability, I think that I've mentioned that already. Creating more financing opportunities, potentially local issuers tapping the Eurobond market to provide those kind of arbitrage opportunities and to offset sort of any domestic fluctuations. I think that's going forward. Price transparency in the post-trade world is key. James touched on the regulations. That's driving down costs in Europe, and as we mentioned, that's where a lot of flows are coming from. And market entry costs, keeping those down to pricing is a global pressure, and we need to keep a look on that. The new instruments, I think, on the corporate bond market, and we've been talking about that for years, the corporate bond market could do with a real shot in the arm, and anything the Borsa Istanbul does on that side, whether that's ESMA recognition of IPOs, etc. All of that's all good stuff, and that needs to be done.
Hirsch, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
it's very about out of time. So James, just last sentences that you can say.
I think it just needs to be disciplined growth, and the introduction and adaptation of the CCP would be one initiative I would focus on.
Okay, thank you very much. Just what we can say, we said 5 reasons, but I think we went beyond that. One of the key elements, important, strong, big banking industry, demographics, no surprises, lots of structural legislative changes, resilient market, introduction of key instruments, and introduction of key infrastructure. I think these are the great elements that for our market. Tim, Hirsch, James, thank you very much. It was good to see you, and hopefully we'll see you next year. Thank you.
Efendim biz de değerli konuklarımıza teşekkür ediyoruz. Sizleri kısa bir süre sahnede misafir etmek isteriz. Türkiye Sermaye Piyasaları Birliği Disiplin Kurulu üyesi ve Türkiye Ekonomi Bankası Genel Müdür Danışmanı Sayın Tolga Ataman'ı sahneye davet ediyorum. Teşekkürlerini iletecekler. İlk olarak Sayın GÜRSON'a teşekkürlerini iletecekler. Değerli arkadaşlarım, biraz ivedilikle sizlerden rica edelim. Buyurun. Evet, bu panelimizin adı Türkiye Sermaye Piyasalarına yatırım yapmaya devam etmek için 5 nedendi. Sayın Tolga Ataman ilk olarak panelimizin moderatörü Sayın ERTUNÇ GÜRSON'a teşekkürlerini sunuyor bir plaketle. Sayın Herş Tegala, efendim sizi biraz daha sahnede misafir edeceğiz. Sayın James Wood, ve son olarak Sayın Timothy Eş. Ve bu güzel anı bir aile fotoğrafıyla taçlandıracağız. Lütfen buyurun efendim. Aile fotoğrafıyla taçlandırmak isteriz. Teşekkür ediyoruz. Evet, Türkiye Sermaye Piyasaları Kongresi 2017 15 dakika sonra CNN Türk özel yayınıyla devam edecek. CNN Türk Genel Müdürü Erdoğan Aktaş'ın konuğu Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Başbakan Yardımcısı Mehmet Şimşek olacak. 15 dakika sonra Salon A'da, yani burada görüşmek dileğiyle.